Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well. Today I am going to be reading you some Reddit stories. I will link the stories in the description box. What happened to my roommate? Many years ago, before kids, rescue animals, a mortgage and a husband, I was a travel writer in Europe. I did most of my trips alone. This story is about the first time I visited Prague. I'd never been to Prague, and the trip was last minute, so I had little time to prepare. My travel partner had dumped me in another country, and I was determined to make the best out of a trip by visiting a place I'd never been. Upon arrival at the train station, I visited the accommodation office and asked for a hostel not far from the center. In my early 20s, winging it was part of the fun. These days I'm far less adventurous. The hostel they sent me to was a sprawling, crumbling slate, grey Art Deco building on a nondescript street, about a 10-minute walk to Stare Mesto. The inside was probably beautiful at one time, but by the time I checked in, it was full of shabby, mismatched furniture and cheap stained carpet. Most of the light fixtures were broken, leaving everything but the lobby dark and gloomy. It smelled of standing water and dust. I found my room, a double for $12 per night, and made note of the fact that I had a roommate. She wasn't there, but on her side of the room there was a suitcase, dressed neatly folded across the back of a plastic chair, a scattering of makeup containers on the beat-up desk, and a stack of German fashion magazines on the bed. As I had no plans or goals on this impromptu trip, so I spent the afternoon exploring Old Town Square, the Jewish Quarter, and Wenceslas Square. I purchased some Schetz crystal for my mom and painted eggs from the street vendor for myself. I also made reservations for a sunset dinner cruise for one. At around 6 p.m. I returned to my room to shower, change clothes, and unload my purchases. When I left my room about an hour later, there was no indication that my roommate had returned at any point during the day. After the cruise, I stopped at a tiny bar on Tinska and had a glass of wine. I'd heard horror stories about the dangers of Prague, but I felt no more trepidation than I did in any other large city. Sure, the cobblestone streets, fog rolling off the Vltava, backlit Gothic architecture, and winding alleys made me think of Jack the Ripper and Dracula, but in a good way. It was nearly midnight when I returned to my hostel, so I was surprised to find that my roommate still hadn't returned. That wasn't uncommon, though. Backpackers are a fickle lot. She could have gone on a short overnight trip and just left her stuff behind, hooked up with a guy or girl, holed up at their place, or hanging out at another hostel, so I was surprised but not concerned. I took another shower before bed, however, and was surprised to find that things in the room had changed up in my return. Her bed was neatly turned down, the magazines had moved to the nightstand, and the dress was gone. The strangest thing, though, was the addition of a pink silky nightgown spread across the bed, my bed. Maybe she thought she still had the room to herself. I didn't see how. My shopping bags, clothes, and toiletries were plain in view. I gently moved the nightgown over to the bed and then settled in for the night as I wrote in my journal. I assumed she was in the shower or somewhere nearby, so I expected her return shortly. After about an hour, though, her side was still empty. I needed to use the restroom before I went to sleep, so I made one last trip down the hall. The building was unusually quiet. There weren't the regular sounds of chatty backpackers, the clinking of glasses, or music that would normally leak through the walls. There was nothing. It was hushed, like a church after the congregation has left. I found myself practically tiptoeing back. My room was near the end of the hall, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the corridor was dark than before. The few working lights were blinking as they struggled to stay lit, and it reminded me of a funhouse. A tightness began to fill in my stomach, and I subconsciously quickened my steps. There wasn't a soul behind me, yet I kept glancing back over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone gaining momentum on me. The only sound was the soft thud of my flip-flops as they struck my soles. I was flooded with relief as I flung open my door, but it didn't last long. Everything was exactly as it left it except for the silky nightgown, which was now back on my bed. Sleep came in fits and starts. I left the lamp on for a while, still convinced my roommate would be right back, but the shadows it cast made the room even spookier. It was too dark with the light off. I'd finally slipped into a deep sleep when I suddenly heard the door open. A man stood in the darkened doorway, the hall light behind him showing just enough for me to see his contoured face. "I didn't mean to," he sobbed. "You have to help me." Too confused and disoriented to be scared, I sat up, scrubbed at my eyes, and reached for the lamp switch. But once the room was lit, I saw that the door was closed. There was no man. I quickly bounded off the bed and went for the door. It was locked. Nobody could have entered without a key, and the hallway, empty. I passed the rest of the night fully clothed, sitting up in bed and with a light on. Though I'd paid for 2 more nights, at 7 a.m. I gathered all my stuff and went down to the reception desk to check out. "By the way," I said to the 20-something receptionist, "my roommate never returned. I'm a little concerned." She picked up the room key, looked at it hard, frowned, and then glanced at her computer. "What room were you again?" When I repeated to her, she looked back at her screen. "Ma'am, that room's been empty for 3 weeks, and it's been cleaned since then. We only have 6 people in this whole building. The hostel has since been renovated and is now a luxury hotel." I realized that we didn't physically meet, but I thought it's relevant since I seemed to have met someone. Someone entered and left my room. To the stranger who picked me up at a park, I recently told my longtime partner of this encounter after realizing how lucky I was. Anyways, I remember being at a B-Day party, being held at a park, and I must have been 4 or 5 years old max. Just because of how small I remember being, the tables at the park my family was at sort of sat on top of the slope. To get down to the playground, you have to walk away. My cousins and I did just that. I then remember a tall, bald white man picking me up and carrying me away in his arms. I was confused, but didn't know what to do. I then remembered my dad turning around from the top of the slope and seeing this happen. He ran down, yelled at the man, he let me go and ran away. Never spoke about it since. So to the older, white, bald man who tried to kidnap me, let's not meet. And there's an edit. Want to address some facts. This happened around 2006-2007. No cops were called. In fact, my parents and my brother and sister left the party almost immediately. Should my dad have called the cops? Maybe. But looking back, I could see just wanting to leave ASAP and making sure I was okay were of top priority. I thank my dad for being there at the party that time. He hates social events. I'm sure it was just my mom and my siblings. It would have taken her a while to notice. Here's to Dad. Orange Eyes. In March of 1959, 3 teenagers went out on an old country road nicknamed Lover's Lane in Mansfield, Ohio. What they went there for, one can only assume, but their night didn't go as expected. The 3 teens fled the area when an 11-foot-tall, 1,000-pound creature with large glowing orange eyes emerged from the forest. Therefore, the area of Mansfield and Charles Mill Lake birthed a local legend. The decades that followed gave many other individuals the opportunity to see this mysterious creature. On one occasion, a group even armed themselves and headed out into the forest and country roads to kill the creature. One night in 1968, a group of preteens chased after the orange-eyed beast with baseball bats and rope, intending to capture the creature, but it managed to escape. In 1991, Orange Eyes was spotted for its final time by 2 fishermen. The creature eventually faded into local legend and was never seen again. Some described the animal as being ape-like, similar to Bigfoot. Others believed that Orange Eyes is an alien trapped on Earth. In October of 1973, a UFO was spotted over Mansfield, which emitted a green beam of light coming from the craft down to the ground. Many locals saw it from different parts of town, and people began to correlate Orange Eyes with UFOs. What exactly Orange Eyes is, we will never know. It hasn't made an appearance in 26 years and presumably isn't coming back. Opinions on the crying lady that I tried to hug as a child. Getting straight to the point, when I first moved into my new house, I was around 5. I don't live there anymore, and I'm 19 now, but I still remember this experience vividly. It makes me tear up every time I talk about it. One night in the middle of the night, I woke up. My mom normally slept with me at the time, but she wasn't there. I figured that she went to my dad's room because she would sometimes do that after I fell asleep. Then I realized that there was a woman sitting on the ground with her back against my bed. She had her knees up and she was holding her legs and crying into her arms. For some reason, I thought she was my mom. Almost like she was somehow making me believe she was my mom, since she didn't look like my mom. She had long black hair that was very messy and tangled. She was wearing a long white dress which was also dirty and had holes and rips and things. She also had pale skin. Since I thought she was my mom, I sat down next to her and tried to comfort her. I kept talking to her and asking her what was wrong, but she wouldn't reply to me. I sat in silence for a while and then decided to hug her. Once I put my arms around her, she disappeared. No noises or anything, just gone. I was scared shitless. It took me years to convince my mom that this actually happened and is the closest I got to any kind of otherworldly or paranormal entity. Does anyone know what this could have been? I never saw her face since she buried her head in her arms. Never saw her again in person after that, but I did have reoccurring fever dreams with a certain ghost demon a few times. Not sure if it was her though. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.